Hey, so apparently movies, I guess, are back. All it took was two Michael B. Jordans and General Chungas. So, I guess that's still a victory. I started off April with The Woman in the Yard. A lot of people made fun of this title, and for good reason, but I actually thought this was really pretty good. It's about a family in the midst of grief combating a creepy woman in the yard who, you guessed it, is really just a very serious metaphor. And yes, this does feature some of the loose traits of, in quotes, elevated horror, but it also kind of looks like your normal Blumhouse movie fare. The thing is that The Woman in the Yard doesn't fit neatly into either box, and I think that it's resulting in some people not really knowing how to feel about it, but I think this was a simple, successful, concept-based horror film. It's probably my favorite Daniel Deadwyler performance now, and it reaches a climax that is maybe unsubtle, but it's also pretty compelling. This won't be the best horror movie of the year, but I think it's pretty impressive, and coming from the director of Black Adam and Jungle Cruise, it just goes to show that maybe filmmakers make better movies when the material isn't IP slop. The Interview is kind of a dumb movie that is pretty thin and not really all that funny. The issue is that it resulted in a cyber attack. So yeah, this movie was kind of a big deal, despite not being all that good or even all that terribly offensive. I mean, I guess it's okay. Like, it's fine. I probably laughed 5 times and was lightly entertained, but that's the deepest my enjoyment went. Kim Jong-un apparently did not feel the same way. I guess he was just angry because this movie made him look like the bad guy, but like, what did you expect? It's like if Hitler watched Inglourious Basterds and thought, I'm offended. So I guess in conclusion, The Interview was not all that great, but I'm glad that it made a very bad person angry. So I guess that means that at least one person had a strong reaction while watching it. Hell of a Summer is the directorial debut of Finn Wolfhard and Billy Burke, and is a throwback horror comedy where teens want to get laid at a summer camp, but then a mass killer starts, killing. So I had fun with this. I like the music, it's overall pretty charming, and you can tell that the cast had a fun time while making it. I mean, not all of the dialogue completely worked for me, and there were a few too many characters to really get a grasp on. They were all simple Gen Z archetypes that either died or I suppose learned a slightly valuable lesson. I think some of the kills are well done, but the killer reveal was, while structurally interesting, wasn't too narratively interesting. The killer's motives at this point in the era of social media are very cliche, and the film has trouble landing the ending, but I think it's good at what it is. It felt like a good summer movie that doesn't make you regret watching it. So, I think that that's cool. Magnolia is a movie that a lot of people have many thoughts about, and I usually agree with all of those thoughts. This is a behemoth in terms of filmmaking, themes, and of course, acting. Julianne Moore in Magnolia is one of the great examples of a person doing a lot, and the movie as a whole is. It's Paul Thomas Anderson dumping a lot of thoughts on us that usually relate to fate, chance, and control, all through a tapestry piece of 9 very, very sad people. Magnolia is so bloated that I don't know many people who wouldn't change a thing. In many ways, its messiness feels purposeful because in its messiness, it is powerful. It's a very universal story told in a way that will most likely not work universally. But like, come on, that second hour just doesn't stop, and I feel like we don't get enough movies that give you a headache and then make you cry. And every time I watch Magnolia, I have to remind myself, life isn't short. It's long. And nothing reminded me more of that than watching a Minecraft movie. I did a whole video on this film. I was not, super happy. You could actually say that, I was sad. But, I'm glad that chapter has passed. I then decided to watch, for some very unknown reason, Sonic the Hedgehog 3. I guess I was just like really, really hating myself for a couple days. This new adventure follows Sonic and team as they face off against Shadow, a villain that is clearly not a villain. Really not a whole lot of mystery here. And while this is not as bad as a Minecraft movie, I just don't get these movies at all. I see that some viewers are able to get a very fulfilling experience out of these 3 films, and I thought that maybe I could finally feel that way about Sonic 3, but I just can't. I find the dialogue to be very bad, the humor to be annoying, and the plotting to be incredibly tiring. These movies have a lot happening in them, and I just, I don't give a shit. And to avoid penalty from Sonic fans, I'll just say that that's on me. Watcher is an independent thriller that I missed a couple years ago and follows a girl named Julia who, along with her husband, moves to Bucharest, but during her lonely days, she starts to believe she is getting stalked by a serial killer who may or may not be the neighbor across the street. So this is just like a really good movie to watch after watching Sonic. It is a flat hour and a half of slow burn tension that is thematically simple but highly effective. I don't think there's a whole lot to talk about other than it's really good and I think it's easy to enjoy. It's a great inventive little movie that that works. And honestly, that's really hard to do. I watched Civil War again leading up to Warfare, and this was my favorite movie of last year, and 4 months later, I still agree. You know, what can I say? Like, I'm consistent with my takes. This was a pretty divisive vision of a broken America that I think mostly works as a road trip movie about journalistic ethics. And then yeah, there's also a civil war going on. I think a lot of people wanted this film to be an examination of the political sphere in the United States, but I think Alex Garland realized that that's an impossible perspective. I mean, the way some or even most people treat political philosophy in the United States is embarrassing, half-assed, and overall just like not productive at all. Our politics are so conflict driven now that like the philosophy element of things has kind of just like been thrown out the window. And Civil War is just saying how horrible of an outcome that can lead to. This is a more than outwardly anti-war film that is mostly interested in its characters and scaring you with really loud gunshots. I think it's just great. It's horrifying, but also kind of oddly comforting in moments. I just think it tonally understands the world in a very specific way that obviously some viewers just don't really vibe with. Warfare was obviously just a beast. It's a 90-minute real-time military thriller where we just watch an American squad in Iraq as a house they've taken over comes under attack. There's been a lot of discourse about Warfare over whether or not it is propaganda for the United States military, and I just don't buy that it's propaganda at all. Saying Warfare is propaganda for the United States military is like saying The Pit is propaganda for the United States healthcare system. It is just not true. If this movie was to be considered propaganda, it would have to make the military look fun and fulfilling, or it would make the soldiers the heroes of the film versus the evil terrorists. But in no way is the experience present here attractive. Like, there's not a part of this film where the intended response is to say, that was so badass. And the heroism that is present in Warfare is never related to shooting a gun and ending someone's life. Because this movie is very aware of the fact that the soldiers really have nothing to do with the war itself. They are not the ones making the decisions. The heroism that is inherent to Warfare is displayed through these characters saving each other's lives. They're saving each other from a situation that they clearly do not want to be in. Like, the first scene of tension in this film is these soldiers taking the houses of these native people and obviously scaring them while they do it. They're the ones transgressing right off the bat by literally entering people's homes against their will. But during the main conflict, these soldiers aren't the first people to open fire. And so it does depict this really interesting list of complications to the point where you lose tally of who is justified in the fight, because that's not what's important to Warfare. This is simply a movie about how it would have majorly sucked to be any of the people involved in this story. But even despite the subject matter, there's still a nice level of character and very precise moments of levity. This is emotional, it's perfectly human, it's tense. Warfare is a really great movie. Ford v Ferrari is a fun movie to watch with your family. It's not interested in breaking the wheel, but it's undeniably solid. Sometimes I wish the movie was rated R just because the dialogue feels kind of hindered with some of the cliche language. But I love the look of this movie. It's very atmospheric and lets you settle into these environments that just feel good to be around. I mean, I don't really care about racing at all. Like, if racing in its many forms is on TV, I get no enjoyment out of it, but whenever you're put in the driver's seat with sweeping camera moves scored by Marco Beltrami and Buck Sanders, it just feels right. And even though some of the dialogue feels a little bit like it's on autopilot, there's still a nice dose of wit, and Matt Damon and Christian Bale can deliver anything, so it's all good. I don't know many people who wouldn't enjoy this movie at least a little bit. And it's also just like a really nice analogy for art and commerce. So if you're one of those people who really like cars and analogies, I mean, this is the movie for you. Drop was a movie that I was not looking forward to at all, but I actually came away feeling pretty pleasant. Which, I mean, being surprised by a movie at least a little bit like that, that's what life is all about. This is a contained thriller in which a woman on a date gets creepy airdrops that might implicate her in a larger conspiracy. Drop is a very light film. I mean, there's danger, but most of the enjoyment I got was from the comedy and charm. The performances are good, and because I didn't hate being around the characters, the suspense was able to work. It's interested in the social media age and distrusts in institutions, but it barely taps into any of it. Most of the time, it's just a brisk thriller that might make you chuckle, and I was pretty okay with that. The Amateur was not a good movie, and this pains me to say because it's one of the few original films that Searchlight was releasing this year. But, this movie, it just was not right. It's all about Rami Malek seeking vengeance after his wife was murked, and I guess this seems to demand a 2-hour runtime. So I'm not really sure if Rami Malek was the worst thing about this movie, or the best thing. I think he's supposed to be an everyman, but the way that Rami Malek delivers dialogue is anything but normal. But at least he's bringing some unconventional energy, because everything else in this movie feels so lazy. I think the filmmaking is trying to be in the same vein as David Fincher, but it lacks the emotion and intentionality of Fincher. It's a movie that people made because it sounded like some people might pay money to go see it. But now that it's here, it's just kind of lame. Sinners is luckily not lame. It's a movie that everyone seems to love. In fact, I really enjoyed this movie, and I still have more problems with it than anyone I've talked to about it. So this is a 1930s vampire blues thriller that, above all else, feels alive. There's no inch of this movie that isn't overflowing with thought and really the joy of being a movie. Like, I think some people have this philosophy that whenever we're watching a movie, we should forget that we're watching a movie. But with Sinners, this feels like a movie through and through. With all the metaphors and symbolism here, this film is conscious of the fact that it is a construct. And I think that enables its best elements while also aiding some of its setbacks. I think Sinners has elements that are undeniably messy. In its quest to blend music, history, religion, Jim Crow politics, and vampires, not every aspect neatly folds into the other. I think the vampire mythology is especially vague, and how it relates to music is kind of thin, but I really appreciate that this feels like a true expression. In the same way as Magnolia, Sinners is a storm of creativity, and as a result, I think we got one of the most dynamic sequences of the decade, while still having a couple moments that feel kind of stilted and rushed. Like, the main villain is defeated through this really cheap Deus Ex Machina moment that I don't really see a whole lot of people talking about. And honestly, the character writing wasn't really doing a whole lot for me. I didn't really feel like I knew who these characters were in the way that the third act required, but that doesn't stop the freshness from seeping all the way through. The big headline surrounding Sinners is, "We need more movies like this." And that is completely true. Just because, I had a list of problems with Sinners doesn't mean that I didn't see the vision. And call me a simple man, but I like when Michael B. Jordan picks up a big gun and annihilates a bunch of racists. I mean, that's pretty badass. It's What's Inside is a movie that is not subtle. You don't really have to have a brain to realize that it's critiquing social media, but guess what? It's really cool. If you don't know, I don't want to spoil it for you, but it's about a group of old college friends playing a very high concept game the day before one of their weddings. And as much as I like that Netflix buying this film made it so that more people probably watched it, I think this would have been a great theatrical experience. It's always moving. It's one of the most creatively made movies of the 2020s in terms of composition and lighting, and there are so many moments that take you off guard. This group of characters are maybe not the deepest bunch, but they do feel like people that you know, and their easily identifiable traits do serve the narrative in a purposeful way. I also love the score mixing in this movie. It's a classical score, but with added instrumentation or augmentation that result in a very off-kilter listening experience. And that's the thing, for being a Netflix movie, it does feel like an experience. I don't know if Greg Jardin can really top what he did here with his next movie, but I will be patiently waiting, and I hope that it gets theatrical distribution. Because I'm not sure if you heard this, Ted Sarandos, the CEO of Netflix, but that's where movies are supposed to be seen. Saying Netflix is saving Hollywood is like saying McDonald's is saving people's gut health. It's just not true. The Menu came out alongside Glass Onion and Triangle of Sadness, and all three are satirical takedowns of the rich, but I think The Menu is the best of them. And I think it's the best because it's not just simply about dunking on rich people, because even though, it's sometimes often deserved, it does eventually become kind of tiresome. The Menu is more so interested in how class interacts with how we consume and appreciate art and products. And what I think The Menu does better than most movies of its kind is how it judges its characters. The people sitting at these tables are insecure, ignorant, and unempathetic, but they're purposefully not evil. And so it's more challenging when Ralph Fiennes, who is technically correct, goes, to put it lightly, overboard with his methods. And I think all this character writing and commentary culminates in one of the best climaxes of the 2020s. I don't want to spoil it if you haven't seen it, but it's the perfect encapsulation of the true joy that innocent and uncommercialized art can bring. It turns out that art and products are better when people want to make them. This is Willy Wonka meets Citizen Kane meets Succession, and it's just a really great, critical, yet also kind of beautiful film. The Ballad of Wallace Island is an unflinching and viscerally sweet movie. And it's so sweet that I think some people will just immediately write it off, but I think that's wrong. This is all about a relatively down and out songwriter who unwittingly goes to perform a concert for a single man named Charles on a very isolated island. This is definitely the funniest movie of the year so far, and it's nice because there's not an over-reliance on slapstick or contemporary humor. It's funny because these characters are so well drawn and specific that their clashes are consistently hilarious. It turns out that if you you understand the people telling the jokes, you will probably find the jokes funnier. And I think the route the comedy takes is really what makes this level of sincerity not off-putting to me, because I am pretty sensitive to over-sentimentality. But The Ballad of Wallace Island doesn't immediately jump to conclusions that are nice and good. It's realistic. These characters are not whole when we meet them at the beginning of the story, and they're not even completely whole at the end. This is a movie very aware of the work and perspective needed to become a better and more content person. And you know, sometimes a movie about becoming better it's like really refreshing, especially whenever it's this down to earth. And you know, sue me, but sometimes I like to be happy. So thank you, The Ballad of Wallace Island. You know, I might have been the only person in my theater when I watched it, but I really enjoyed it. The Accountant 2 did not inspire the same level of enjoyment. In fact, the only thing it inspired were questions about whether anyone on this set has ever met anyone with autism. And it's odd that most of the people who made this are the same people who made the first film. And I thought the first movie was pretty good and didn't depict autistic people, especially children, as these emotionless machines. Now, I was 14 when the first Accountant came out, and I haven't seen it since, but I don't remember that first film being as tone deaf and dumb as this one is. The Accountant 2 is an overly plotted, confused movie, which is a shame because I think the filmmaking here has a lot of merit and I would typically enjoy a buddy action movie. But this is littered with pacing issues, lazily written arcs, and nonsense tech montages. And I don't want this film's depiction of autism to overrun my thoughts on its artistic merit, but like, this was not correct. Slight spoiler, but like in this movie, there's this neuroscience center, and in it, there's just like a bunch of autistic savant children. And instead of like playing around and, you know, being children, what they do is they do like Black Ops for Ben Affleck's character, and it's like, what the heck are we doing watching these like 12-year-old savants just hack into government databases? Because number one, you know, I'm not trying to like get political, but child labor, it's not really all that cool, okay? I'm not trying to like, you know, step on any toes there, but it's not a great thing. And number two, while yes, there are certainly savants in the autistic community, they're not all just superheroes who can crack codes. The movie could have at least shown just one autistic child who's just like chilling, you know, being a kid. But instead, all the children are just like elite hackers. And I'm like, how did this happen? I don't know. Luckily, the head of our Department of Health is very educated on the autism spectrum. Oh, fuck. Oh, that's not true. In a Violent Nature is a film that most people are likely to hate, and it's because, get this, it's an experimental film. So this has the story of your usual slasher in which a bunch of young troublemakers are picked off by a mass killer, but this film is plotted from the perspective of the killer. So yes, a lot of this movie is watching an ugly guy walk around the woods until he sees people too off. And while I'm not saying that this is like my favorite horror movie, I'm glad that it's here. I was intrigued by the little bits of lore, I found the character writing to be serviceable, and the gore was really well done. Sometimes I found the sound design to be slightly overbearing, but also loved a lot of the ambience. I don't know, really there's not a whole lot to say other than if you think this movie sounds good, you will probably think it's pretty good. If you don't think that it sounds cool, then, you know, you probably won't think that it's all that cool. I really enjoyed Until Dawn. Now, if you're here to say, oh, but it's nothing like the game, I don't really care. Not to invalidate your opinion, but in adaptational debates, perspective is everything. And my perspective is that I haven't played the game. And so I thought this was a fun conceptual horror movie where we follow a group of relatively conventional teens reliving the same night fighting different horror movie archetypes. And I think the movie's at its best when it's at its simplest. Like when the plottier elements kick in and exposition dumps start to happen, I lose a bit of interest. But as a kind of love letter to the genre and a gonzo slasher, it's fun. I like the way David F. Sandberg makes things. I think he has a good grasp on hitting a nice, enjoyable level of horror and fun. This is a good upper level gateway horror movie. And while I technically think that it has just as many negatives as positives, its positives lasted a little bit longer whenever I left the theater. I will probably watch this again, and I will probably enjoy doing it. The Legend of Ochi is the newest from A24 and is pretty confusing. I'm not sure if the script was underdeveloped or if the editing left a lot of footage on the cutting room floor, but some things in this movie to me just did not make a whole lot of sense. It's all about a girl getting a baby Ochi, this supposedly dangerous fantasy creature, back to its family before her parent, played by Willem Dafoe, finds her. And I often didn't really understand the emotional journey of these characters or the bits of lore that seem essential to the understanding of the film, but I was also knocked out by the vision here. This is Isaiah Saxon's first feature film, and it really does feel like a breath of fresh air. The world building, the practical effects, the score, The Legend of Ochi can truly cast a spell. And while this does kind of feel derivative of Wes Anderson or How to Train Your Dragon or even like some Ray Harryhausen in there, I still did think that it had its own identity, even if that identity was a little bit confusing. I think the core of these characters are compelling, and there are a couple lines of dialogue that do strike a chord, but I sadly just feel like there wasn't really enough. I'm very quick to say that a movie is too long, but in this case, it wasn't long enough. And honestly, that kind of feels like a refreshing thing to say. I might not be watching this movie again anytime soon, but I might be thinking about it, and I think that that's good enough. All right, well, that was that. Don't beat me up for my sinner's takes. You know, I'm just a boy, okay? But behave yourselves. I hope your life goes well, and I hope to see you next time in whatever the hell I'm talking about next.